I grew up believing my mother was the strongest woman in the world. She was my nurse, my teacher, my best friend, and my only constant. Wherever I went, she was there, hovering, protecting, explaining my illnesses to people who looked at me with pity or admiration. I didn't question it. I didn't know I was supposed to. When you're a child, your mother's word is truth. She told me I was sick. Not just a little sick, but terribly sick, so fragile that the wrong food or too much sunlight could make me worse. I had leukemia, she said, and muscular dystrophy, and seizures, and asthma, and maybe even a sleep disorder. There were so many pills lined up on the kitchen counter that they looked like tiny soldiers in a row, waiting for orders. She organized them every morning, crushed some into applesauce, and handed me the spoon with a smile that said, "This is what's keeping you alive." Doctors' offices were my playgrounds. I spent more time under fluorescent lights than in the sun. The nurses knew my name. They spoke to me in soft voices and told me I was brave. I liked that word, brave. My mother would squeeze my hand and say, "You're my little warrior." I remember her face glowing with pride when someone called her a hero for taking such good care of me. Our days were filled with appointments and charity events. People donated money, toys, and even vacations to help us. I once met a celebrity at a fundraiser who hugged me and told me how inspiring I was. It made me feel special, like I had a purpose. My mother always said God had chosen us for a reason, to show others the power of love and strength. At night, she would read me stories about princesses trapped in towers, waiting for someone to rescue them. She said I was her princess, and she was the one keeping me safe from a world that didn't understand how fragile I was. I believed her because every time I tried to do something on my own, stand up from my wheelchair, or reach for something without asking, she would gasp and rush to stop me. "Sweetheart, you'll hurt yourself," she'd whisper. Her eyes would fill with tears, and guilt would crawl through me. I didn't want to make her sad. Looking back, there were moments when things didn't quite add up. Sometimes I could move my legs more than I should have been able to. Sometimes the medicine made me feel worse, not better. But I told myself that mothers don't lie. They sacrifice. They know things we don't. I remember one doctor once asked if I could try walking. My mother laughed it off, her tone light but firm. "Oh, she can't," she said. "Her muscles don't work like yours or mine." The doctor nodded, but I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, quickly smothered by my mother's confidence. She always knew how to talk to people, how to make them believe her. Home was filled with love and fear in equal measure. I loved her because she was all I had. But I feared the world she built for me, one where illness was my identity. Every part of my life revolved around her words. Every decision was filtered through her control. I didn't realize then that the person who claimed to protect me was the one keeping me imprisoned. I didn't know that the woman I trusted most would become the reason I'd one day have to fight for the right to live my own truth. People used to smile at me with a kind of sadness in their eyes. They saw a fragile little girl in a wheelchair, dressed in bright colors and oversized glasses, holding her mother's hand wherever she went. I was the sick girl, and everyone loved me for it. They brought balloons to the hospital, handmade cards, dolls, and stuffed animals with ribbons around their necks. I always said thank you, even though I didn't really understand why strangers cared so much about me. My mother said I had been sick since I was a baby. She told people I was born prematurely, that my brain hadn't developed quite right, and that my muscles were too weak for me to walk. Some days, she'd tell doctors I had leukemia. Other days, it was muscular dystrophy, seizures, or some rare disorder that only she could pronounce. She could list my symptoms faster than the doctors could take notes. When she spoke, her voice trembled with sincerity, and people believed every word. To the outside world, she was the perfect mother, gentle, patient, endlessly devoted. People would stop her in public to compliment her strength. "You're such an inspiration," they'd say, and she'd smile humbly, brushing my hair from my face. "I just do what any mother would do," she'd reply. But I could see how much she loved the attention. The compliments fed her like medicine. We spent years moving from one doctor to another. Each visit followed the same pattern. My mother spoke, and I sat quietly. I never corrected her. I didn't think I was allowed to. If a doctor asked me how I felt, I looked at her before answering. Sometimes she would finish my sentences for me. "She gets tired so easily," she'd say. "She can't handle much excitement." I nodded, because that was the truth I had been taught. At home, my wheelchair was my shadow. I wasn't supposed to stand, though sometimes I did when no one was looking. I would hold onto the bedpost and lift myself just to see if I could. My legs wobbled, but they worked. It scared me how easy it was. I'd sit back down quickly, afraid she might walk in and see. I didn't understand why something that felt natural was forbidden. There were moments when the truth tried to whisper to me, but I drowned it out. Whenever I felt confused, my mother would remind me how lucky I was to have her. "You could die without me," she'd say softly, brushing my hair. "I keep you safe." And I believed her. The pills, the feeding tubes, the endless tests, they were proof of her love. She was my protector from a world that would never understand. People sent us money, donated medical supplies, and even organized trips to Disney World. I remember one charity event where I was crowned Child of the Year. Cameras flashed as my mother pushed me on stage. The lights were blinding, and the crowd clapped as if I'd achieved something great. I smiled because I was supposed to. I didn't realize I was just playing a role in her story. Sometimes at night, when she was asleep, I'd look at my reflection and wonder what was wrong with me. Not the diseases, those I'd accepted, but the strange, empty feeling in my chest. I didn't know then that what I felt wasn't sickness. It was confusion, a faint awareness that something in my world wasn't right, but I couldn't name it, and I didn't dare question her. She was my mother, my world, and everything I believed about myself came from her lips. After Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, our lives took a strange turn that seemed, at the time, like a miracle. The storm destroyed so much: homes, families, neighborhoods. But for us, it became another chapter in my mother's story of struggle and survival. She told everyone we had lost everything, that I was too weak to endure the chaos, and that we needed a fresh start somewhere safe. People listened. People helped. That was something my mother had always been good at, drawing sympathy like gravity pulls in light. When a charity called Habitat for Humanity heard about us, they decided to build us a new home in Springfield, Missouri. It wasn't just a house. It was a dream wrapped in pink siding and filled with donated furniture, medical equipment, and gifts from kind strangers. I still remember the day we moved in. Reporters came, cameras flashed, and my mother smiled for every picture. She said this was God's blessing for all we had endured. Everyone clapped. No one questioned. The house itself was designed with me in mind, or at least the version of me the world believed in. There were ramps at every entrance, wide hallways for my wheelchair, and even a jacuzzi bathtub to help with my muscle pain. My bedroom walls were painted lavender and covered in stuffed animals. It looked like something from a fairy tale, and I felt proud when visitors came to see it. My mother told them, "Gypsy deserves the best. She's fought so hard." I didn't know what I was fighting, but I nodded anyway. Neighbors adored us. They called us the miracle family. People dropped by with casseroles and birthday cards. They'd mow our lawn, help with groceries, and sometimes just sit and talk on the porch with my mother. She was friendly, charming, and always in control of the conversation. She told everyone I had the mind of a 7-year-old, that I couldn't walk, and that my father had abandoned us because he couldn't handle having a sick child. No one ever thought to ask me my side. Why would they? My mother's word was enough. Inside that perfect pink house, life revolved around medical routines. Pills in the morning, syrups at noon, injections at night. My mother kept binders filled with my medical records, thick stacks of papers with doctor's notes, prescriptions, and hospital summaries. She'd carry them to every appointment like a trophy case of proof. If a doctor questioned anything, she'd flip through the files until she found something to back up her story. She always found something. Sometimes, though, she'd speak differently when we were alone. "You're lucky people care," she'd whisper. "Without me, no one would know what to do with you." I never understood why she said it that way. Her tone wasn't loving. It was warning, as if she was reminding me that I belonged to her, that everything we had, the house, the donations, the attention, depended on the story she told about me. At night, when the neighborhood was quiet, I would sit by my bedroom window and watch the lights flicker across the street. The world outside looked so normal. Kids rode bikes, families grilled on their porches, and teenagers walked home laughing. I wondered what it felt like to just live without being sick. I wondered if any of those girls my age ever had to take handfuls of pills before bed. But whenever I thought too much, I reminded myself that my mother knew best. She had built this home, this life, this identity for us. The pink house wasn't just a shelter. It was a stage, and every room was part of her script. The ramps, the hospital bed, the sympathy letters, they weren't built for comfort. They were built to keep the illusion alive. I thought that house was our reward for surviving the storm. I didn't realize then that it was our cage, painted in soft colors to make it easier to love. Not every doctor believed my mother. For most of them, she was convincing, polite, knowledgeable, endlessly attentive. She carried folders of medical records that looked so official, so detailed, that no one wanted to challenge her. But every once in a while, someone did. And those moments, small as they seemed, were cracks in the perfect story she'd built. I remember sitting in cold exam rooms, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and the quiet hum of machines. My mother always answered questions before I could. If a doctor asked me how I felt, she'd interrupt with, "She gets confused easily, don't worry." She'd smooth my hair and add, "She has the mind of a little girl." Most doctors accepted that and moved on. They looked at the wheelchair, the oxygen tank, the feeding tube, and saw what they expected to see: a sick child with a loving mother. But not all of them were so easily convinced. One doctor in particular stands out in my memory. He was younger than most, soft-spoken but observant. He examined me carefully, looked at my lab results, and then looked at my mother. "Her tests don't show signs of muscular dystrophy," he said gently. "Maybe we should reevaluate her diagnosis." I remember the silence that followed. My mother's smile tightened. "We've seen specialists," she said, her tone still polite but sharper now. "She's had this diagnosis since she was a baby. You must have missed something." The doctor didn't argue, but his eyes stayed on me a little too long, as if he could see through the act. That made me nervous. I didn't know what he saw, only that I wasn't supposed to contradict her. Later, in the car, she was quiet for most of the ride. Then, without looking at me, she said, "Some doctors don't know what they're talking about. You can't trust everyone." I nodded, ashamed for reasons I couldn't name. I didn't understand what I'd done wrong, but I knew she was angry, not at the doctor, but at the idea that someone might not believe her. Years later, I learned that some doctors had raised red flags about my case. One pediatric neurologist, Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein, had even written in his notes that he suspected my mother was suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care to gain attention or sympathy. He noticed that many of my medical claims didn't make sense. My test results were normal. My records were incomplete or contradictory. But when he tried to follow up, no one acted on his concerns. My mother's reputation as a dedicated, struggling single mom outweighed his doubts. It's strange to think about now. How many professionals could have stopped everything? How many opportunities there were for the truth to come out? But people tend to believe what feels good. My mother's story made people feel compassionate, useful, and kind. Questioning her would have meant admitting that all that sympathy, all those donations and kind gestures, might have been built on a lie. It's easier to believe in a mother's love than to suspect her of abuse. For me, the doctor's offices were just another part of life. I didn't know that my mother was manipulating them, rewriting my history one form at a time. I didn't understand that she was collecting diagnoses like souvenirs. I trusted her completely, even when she whispered to me before appointments, "Don't say too much, sweetheart. I'll do the talking." Looking back, I can still feel the weight of those visits, the way her hand gripped mine when someone asked too many questions, the way her tone shifted from sweet to sharp when she felt cornered. The doctors saw a devoted mother protecting her sick child. I see now that she was protecting something else entirely. The illusion that gave her purpose, power, and control. If just one person had looked closer, really looked, my life might have turned out differently. But in a system built on trust, no one imagined a mother could love her child through lies. Life inside our pink house was carefully controlled. Every minute, every action, every breath felt scheduled and supervised. My mother built her world around me, and within that world, she was the sun. Everything revolved around her, her voice, her approval, her fear. I didn't understand it then. But my life wasn't mine. It was a performance she directed, and I played the part she needed me to play. Each morning started with medicine. Pills for pain, pills for seizures, pills to help me sleep, pills to help me wake up. I didn't even know what most of them were for. My mother kept them in labeled containers, organized by color and dosage as if she were running a pharmacy. She'd hand them to me with water or spoon them into applesauce, and I'd swallow them without question. She always said, "These will help you, sweetheart." I believed her, even when they made me dizzy or numb. She homeschooled me, though school mostly meant coloring sheets and watching movies about princesses or animals who needed rescuing. She said I was too sick to go to a real school, that other kids might get me sick or hurt me by accident. I didn't argue. I didn't know any different. The only people I saw were doctors, neighbors, or charity workers. They all treated her with admiration and me with pity. That became our rhythm. Her the hero, me the patient. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone alone. If a neighbor stopped by and asked how I was doing, she'd answer for me. If a nurse asked a question during a home visit, she'd cut in before I could respond. She gets shy, she'd say, smiling. She doesn't understand much. I used to wonder if that was true. Maybe I really was too simple-minded to take care of myself. After all, she reminded me often, "You wouldn't last a day without me." There were rules about everything. What I could eat, what I could wear, and even what time I could go to sleep. I wasn't allowed to eat candy or drink soda. She said sugar could make me sick. If I reached for something without asking, she'd scold me like a child. Once, a neighbor gave me a piece of chocolate at a holiday event, and when my mother found out, she threw it away and told me how dangerous it was. "You could choke," she warned, her eyes fierce. "You don't want another trip to the hospital, do you?" I shook my head quickly. Hospitals scared me, and she knew that. At night, when the house was quiet, I sometimes lay awake listening to her moving through the kitchen, humming to herself. I'd hear her on the phone telling someone about my latest setback or how strong I was being. Her voice would soften, like she was playing a part even when I wasn't watching. I used to think she just loved talking about me. Now I know she loved the attention. I didn't realize it then, but she kept me sick by keeping me dependent. The feeding tubes, the wheelchair, the endless medications, they weren't just props. They were shackles. She told me I needed them, and I believed it because I needed her. She convinced everyone, even me, that I was too fragile for the world. Once I asked her why I couldn't walk outside on my own. "Because people don't understand you," she said gently, brushing my hair back. "They might stare or say something cruel. You're special, and the world isn't kind to special people." It sounded like love, but it wasn't. It was control disguised as protection. Over time, I stopped asking questions. It was easier that way. I learned how to read her moods, how to smile when she wanted me to, how to stay silent when she was tense. I didn't know what freedom felt like, so I didn't miss it. I thought safety meant obedience. I thought love meant never saying no. But deep down, beneath the pills, the fear, and the quiet, something in me was starting to stir, a small, unfamiliar voice that whispered, "This isn't right." I didn't know it yet, but that voice would grow louder with time. And someday, it would be the thing that finally broke the cage she built around me. It started with curiosity, the kind that comes quietly at first. For years, the outside world had been something I only watched through windows or TV screens. My mother said the internet was dangerous, that people online lied and tricked you. So I stayed away, or at least, I tried to. But late at night, when she was asleep, I'd sneak into the living room and turn on her old laptop. The glow of the screen felt like a forbidden sunrise, and for the first time, I had a world that wasn't filtered through her words. At first, I used it just to read. I looked up cartoons, movies, and fairy tales, stories where girls like me escaped their cages. Then I discovered social media. I made a secret account, one with a fake name and no pictures of me in my wheelchair. Online, no one saw the sick girl. I was just Gypsy. I could talk to people, laugh, flirt, and for once, feel like a normal teenager. That's how I met him, Nicholas Gojon. It was through a Christian dating site, though our conversations quickly became less about faith and more about freedom. He was awkward and sweet, sometimes intense, but he listened to me. He didn't talk to me like a child. He called me beautiful. No one had ever said that to me before. Our conversations became my secret lifeline. I told him about my mother, about how she watched my every move and made me take medicine I didn't understand. He told me he wanted to protect me, that he would never let anyone hurt me again. I didn't realize then that I was trading one kind of control for another. I only knew that he made me feel seen. Over time, we built a fantasy world together. We talked about running away, getting married, and starting over somewhere far from Missouri. I'd imagine us living in a small apartment, cooking dinner together, watching movies, and walking outside whenever we wanted. The idea of freedom became intoxicating. It was like oxygen after years of holding my breath. One night, I couldn't keep it a secret anymore. I told my mother I had met someone online. Her reaction was instant and terrifying. She screamed through the laptop across the room and said I had betrayed her. "You don't know what kind of people are out there," she shouted. "You're too naive. You need me." She took away my computer, locked it in her closet, and for weeks, she barely spoke to me except to give me medicine. But she couldn't stop me completely. I found other ways, using her phone when she was asleep, borrowing a neighbor's Wi-Fi, or sneaking to the computer during the day when she was outside. Nicholas and I started planning in secret. He told me he'd come for me. He said we could be together forever. His messages were full of promises and devotion, but also obsession. I didn't see it then. I was too desperate to believe that someone wanted to save me. Every conversation made me more aware of the prison I lived in. My mother's rules, her lies, her control, it all began to feel unbearable. I started to see her not as my protector, but as my captor. Still, I felt trapped. I couldn't walk into the world and tell people the truth. No one would believe me. Everyone thought I was sick and that she was a saint. So when Nicholas started talking about ways to make it stop, I listened. I didn't know what I wanted, only that I couldn't live like that anymore. The fear, the isolation, the constant pretending, it had hollowed me out. I wanted to breathe. I wanted to choose something, anything for myself. Looking back, I know how dangerous that mix of innocence and desperation was. I was naive, lonely, and aching for escape. What began as an online friendship became a plan that would change everything. I thought I had found love. What I really found was the beginning of the end. The night everything changed was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, as if the world itself is holding its breath. I remember sitting in my room, the lights dimmed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I had spent weeks convincing myself that this was the only way out, that freedom had a price, and I was about to pay it. Nicholas had come to Missouri. I had helped plan it. I told him where we lived, how to get inside, and when my mother would be asleep. We talked about it over and over, like a terrible lullaby that wouldn't stop playing. Each time, I told myself I didn't mean it, but deep down, I knew I wasn't stopping him either. That night, she had gone to bed after another argument. She was angry because I had been talking to someone online again. "You'll never learn," she said, her voice low and sharp. "You're not ready for the world." She gave me my pills, kissed my forehead, and went to her room. I listened to the sound of her door closing. It felt final, somehow. When Nicholas arrived, everything felt unreal. I met him outside in the dark, my hands shaking. He was nervous too, whispering my name, his eyes wide. He carried a knife. I didn't look at it for long. I told him she was sleeping, that I couldn't watch. He nodded and went inside. I hid in the bathroom and covered my ears. But walls don't keep out that kind of sound. The noise was fast, messy, human. Then silence. I remember my breath catching, my whole body trembling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the floor tiles, waiting for something inside me to break. When he came back, his hands were shaking, his shirt stained. "It's done," he said softly. I didn't look at him. I didn't know what to say. I felt numb, like I was floating outside my body, watching someone else's life unfold. For years, I had dreamed of escape, of freedom, of the day my mother's control would end. But now that it had, the air felt wrong. We packed what we could: money, clothes, and my birth certificate. I walked out of that pink house on my own 2 feet. The first time I had ever left without her. The night air was warm, but I couldn't stop shivering. I looked back once at the house glowing faintly under the porch light. It looked peaceful, untouched, almost innocent. You'd never guess what had happened inside. We took a bus to Wisconsin, where Nicholas lived. On the ride, I stared out the window, trying to understand what I had done. I told myself this was freedom. I told myself she couldn't hurt me anymore. But the truth was, I didn't feel free. I felt hollow. The fear that had ruled my life had turned into something worse. Guilt. For a few days, we tried to live normally. We watched movies, ate fast food, and talked about our future like we hadn't destroyed our past. But the silence between us grew heavier. He called what happened our secret. I tried to believe it could stay one. It didn't take long for the world to find out. My mother's friends grew suspicious when she stopped answering calls. A few days later, a post appeared on her Facebook account, something cruel and cryptic that I had written in panic, hoping someone would come. And they did. When the police found her body, they also found out the truth about me, that I could walk, that I wasn't sick, that everything people believed about us was a lie. The story spread like wildfire. The sick girl who could walk, the mother who wasn't who she seemed. That night was supposed to be my escape. Instead, it became the moment that defined me forever. I thought I was running toward freedom, but what I really did was trade one prison for another. And for the first time in my life, the person who needed saving was me. When the truth finally came out, it didn't feel like justice. It felt like exposure, raw, humiliating, and impossible to escape. The world I had known, built entirely on my mother's lies, collapsed overnight. For years, people had believed in the story of a sick little girl and her selfless mother. Now, the headlines told a different tale. The girl who could walk, the mother who lied, and the murder that shattered a fantasy. When the police found my mother's body, they also discovered her carefully crafted world of deception. Medical files that didn't match, pill bottles full of unnecessary prescriptions, old test results that showed nothing was ever wrong with me. My wheelchair, my feeding tubes, my medications, every symbol of my illness became evidence of her manipulation. The same doctors, neighbors, and charities who once adored us now felt betrayed. They weren't just mourning her death. They were mourning the truth. I remember sitting in the interrogation room, the bright light overhead burning my eyes. The detective's voice was calm but firm as he asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why didn't you tell someone? Did you know what Nicholas was going to do? I told them the truth, or as much of it as I could manage, that I had been controlled my entire life, that my mother lied about everything, even my age, that I didn't know how to stop her, or how to live without her. They looked at me like I was both a victim and a criminal, and in a way, I was both. When news of the case spread, the public's reaction was divided. Some saw me as a murderer. Others saw me as a survivor. People argued online about who to blame. My mother for her years of abuse or me for the way it ended. Strangers debated my life as if it were a movie. Some said they would have done the same thing. Others said I should have run away. No one understood that I hadn't been allowed to run. My mother had built an invisible fence around me, one made not of walls or locks, but fear. The hardest part was learning who I really was. I found out I wasn't 15, like she'd always told me. I was 23. I learned that most of my conditions were fake. My teeth had rotted from medications I never needed. My muscles were weak, not because of disease, but from years of disuse. I had to relearn how to eat without a feeding tube, how to walk confidently without a wheelchair, and how to make choices without asking for permission. It was like being reborn in the middle of chaos. The people who once pitied us couldn't comprehend how deep her manipulation went. They didn't understand how she fooled not just them, but entire systems, doctors, social workers, schools, charities, and even the police. She had crafted her image so carefully that no one dared question her. And I, trapped inside her story, had believed it too. After I was arrested, I watched the world try to piece together our lives. They showed photos of us at charity events, smiling under bright lights. They showed the pink house, the wheelchair, and the Disney trips. To everyone else, it looked like a fairy tale gone wrong. To me, it was finally the truth being seen. But the truth didn't bring peace. It brought a heavy kind of grief, a mourning not just for my mother, but for the years that were stolen from me, for the girl I never got to be, for the life that ended before it even began. The community that once loved my mother was shocked. Neighbors said she had seemed so kind, so gentle. Doctors came forward with their suspicions, admitting they had doubted her but never acted. Everyone had a reason for looking the other way. Everyone had trusted her more than they trusted the facts. And as the truth spread, I realized something painful. Lies can't survive forever, but when they fall apart, they take everything with them. The love, the trust, the sympathy, all vanished. What was left was the messy, uncomfortable truth about a mother who craved attention more than honesty, and a daughter who never learned how to tell the difference between love and control. That truth unraveled everything. But in that unraveling, I began to see the world for what it really was, unforgiving, complicated, but but real. And for the first time, I was part of it. When I entered prison, I thought it would be the end of my story. Instead, it became the beginning of something I had never experienced before: freedom. It sounds strange to say that about a place with walls and bars, but in a way, I was freer behind them than I had ever been at home. For the first time in my life, no one told me what to eat, what to wear, or what to say. No one hovered over me, watching my every move. The rules were strict, but they were clear. There was structure, but no manipulation. For a girl who had lived in fear of a smiling, soft-spoken woman, even a prison cell felt like space to breathe. At first, I was terrified. I didn't know how to exist without my mother. I had spent years being told that I couldn't survive on my own, that I was sick, fragile, and dependent. In those early days, I woke up expecting her to burst through the door and scold me for standing too long or eating the wrong thing. Her voice still lived in my head, whispering that I couldn't do anything without her. It took time to quiet that voice. Other inmates didn't know what to make of me. Some recognized me from the news. Others had no idea who I was. I told bits and pieces of my story when people asked, but it always felt like I was talking about someone else. The girl in the wheelchair, the one who smiled for cameras and held her mother's hand, wasn't me anymore. I was learning how to exist without her shadow. The counselors in prison helped me unpack the layers of trauma. I began to understand that my mother's actions fit a psychological pattern called Munchausen by proxy, a rare disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care to gain sympathy or attention. Understanding it didn't excuse what she did, but it helped me make sense of the chaos I'd lived through. For so long, I had believed I was broken. Now I realized the sickness was never mine, it was hers. I started therapy sessions where I learned how to make decisions, how to trust my instincts, and how to recognize manipulation. It was strange to be 24 and learning things most people figure out as children. But it was also healing. Each day, I took small steps, literally and emotionally. I walked farther than I ever had before, strengthening muscles that had been left to waste. I ate food without permission. I learned how to use a phone, how to write letters, and how to express anger and sadness without fear of punishment. In the quiet of prison, I also began to forgive, not to excuse, but to release. I realized that holding on to hate would only keep me trapped in the same cycle my mother created. Forgiving her didn't mean forgetting what she did. It meant acknowledging that she was a deeply sick woman who needed help long before she ever hurt me. I'll never know why no one stopped her. But I know now that I have the power to stop the pattern. Education became my lifeline. I earned my GED, took classes on psychology, and began reading everything I could about trauma, identity, and resilience. The more I learned, the more I understood how many others live in silent control, trapped in abusive relationships where love is used as a weapon. I began writing letters to people who reached out after seeing my story, sharing what I was learning about healing. Over time, I found a new purpose. My story wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning. I realized that what happened to me could happen to others if the signs were ignored. Doctors, teachers, and neighbors had seen clues, but fear or disbelief kept them from acting. I wanted to change that, to help people recognize the patterns before it's too late. Prison didn't erase the past, but it gave me perspective. It taught me that survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about rebuilding your sense of self after the danger is gone. For years, my mother defined every part of who I was. In that small, concrete cell, I started defining myself. Not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as someone finally learning to live. By the time I looked in the mirror and truly saw my reflection, I didn't see the girl in the wheelchair anymore. I saw Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a woman who had been through darkness but was finally stepping into her own light. When I was finally released, the world felt overwhelming. The noise, the colors, the choices, it was everything I had once dreamed of. But it also frightened me. I had spent most of my life being told that freedom was dangerous, that I couldn't survive without someone taking care of me. Now, for the first time, I had to prove to myself that I could. Walking out of prison gates wasn't just about finishing a sentence. It was about starting a life that had been stolen from me long ago. The first moments outside were almost too much to process. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and strangers called my name. Everyone wanted to know what freedom felt like, but I didn't have an answer. How could I describe something I had never truly experienced? Every breath of air felt heavy with both relief and grief. I was free, yes, but I was also standing in the wreckage of everything that had made me who I was. The world had moved on while I was hidden away. Technology, fashion, slang, everything felt foreign. I was in my early 30s, but emotionally, I felt like a teenager who had missed the years where people learn who they are. I had to learn everything from scratch. How to manage money, how to drive, how to make decisions without second-guessing myself. Small things that most people take for granted, ordering food at a restaurant, walking through a mall, and choosing clothes, felt like milestones. People's reactions were complicated. Some welcomed me with warmth and compassion, calling me brave. Others saw me only as the girl who killed her mother. It was strange to be both admired and judged at the same time. I tried not to read the comments online, but sometimes they found their way to me anyway. Everyone had an opinion about my life, and not all of them were kind. But this time, I refused to let their voices define me. What grounded me most was purpose. I started speaking publicly about my experience, not for sympathy, but to educate. I wanted people to understand how Munchausen by proxy can go unnoticed for years, how easily love can be twisted into control, and how important it is to listen when something doesn't feel right. I spoke to nurses, social workers, and students about recognizing red flags in both caregivers and medical cases. If sharing my story could save even one person from what I endured, it was worth the pain of retelling it. Therapy remained a constant part of my life. Healing didn't end with freedom. It began there. I spent hours unpacking the layers of trauma my mother left behind. Sometimes I missed her, not the manipulative version of her, but the moments where she felt real. The truth is, love and abuse had been so tightly woven together that even grief was confusing. But I learned that it was okay to feel both sadness and anger. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward without letting her control me anymore. I also learned to form healthy relationships, something I had never known before. People who cared for me without expecting something in return felt unfamiliar at first. It took time to trust them, to believe that kindness could exist without hidden motives. Slowly, I began to build a circle of people who saw me not as a victim, not as a criminal, but as a human being trying to rebuild. The more I spoke out, the more I realized how many others had similar stories, children, partners, and even parents trapped in cycles of manipulation and medical abuse. I started working with advocacy groups to raise awareness about psychological control and medical fraud. My name had once been associated with deception and tragedy. Now, I wanted it to stand for change. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about the pink house in Missouri, the one built by charity donations, the one everyone thought was a symbol of love. Strangely, that house became a monument to lies. But it also became the starting point for truth. What was once built on deceit is now a reminder of what I survived. Today, I live a quiet, honest life. I can walk, I can eat, I can laugh without fear of punishment. I make my own choices, and that still feels like a miracle. The road to healing is long, but every day I wake up knowing that I am living it on my own terms. My story isn't just about crime or tragedy. It's about the human capacity to survive, to rebuild, and to learn. It's about the power of truth, even when it hurts. And most of all, it's about the strength it takes to reclaim your life after someone else has stolen it. For the first time, I'm not the girl in the wheelchair or the daughter of Dee Dee Blanchard. I'm simply Gypsy, alive, learning, and finally free.